The kitchen faucet dripped with the persistence of a metronome, each drop echoing through the cavernous Victorian mansion I'd inherited 3 months ago. At 2 a.m, with a wrench in one hand and a flashlight clenched between my teeth, I was beginning to understand why my grandfather had left this place to rot for the last decade of his life. Millionaire problems, I muttered, wrestling with a pipe that seemed older than the town itself. The irony wasn't lost on me. Nathan Cross, former IT repair guy, now owner of the biggest house in Haverford, Massachusetts, still fixing things with his own hands because old habits die hard. That's when I heard Emily's voice drifting down from the bedroom above, soft and intimate in a way that made my stomach clench. She was supposed to be asleep, had been when I'd slipped out of bed an hour ago to tackle this latest household crisis. "I can't wait much longer, baby," she whispered, her voice carrying through the old house's thin walls and heating vents. "This whole charade is wearing me down." I set the wrench down carefully, my hand suddenly steady despite the tremor running through my chest. 3 years of marriage, and I'd never heard that particular tone when she talked to me, not once. "Rich, you promised me this would be over soon," she continued, and there it was, the name that confirmed what some dark corner of my mind had been whispering for weeks. Rich Keller, managing partner at Morrison, Keller and Associates, where my wife worked as a junior associate. The golden boy of Haverford's legal community with his perfect teeth and his BMW and his country club membership. I crept closer to the heating vent, my bare feet silent on the cold hardwood. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. I know, Emily was saying, but he's not as stupid as we thought. Sometimes I catch him looking at me like he knows something, and now with all this money... Her voice trailed off, then came back stronger. "We need to move faster, file the papers next week." Papers. My jaw tightened. What papers? "The mental incompetency angle will work," she continued. "Everyone in town already thinks he's lost it, living in this creepy old house, barely talking to anyone. We just need to document a few more incidents, maybe get some witnesses to testify about his erratic behavior." The words hit me like a physical blow. Mental incompetency. They were planning to have me declared unfit to manage my inheritance, the inheritance that had transformed me from Haverford's resident nobody into someone worth stealing from. "Tasha's been brilliant with the social media campaign," Emily went on. "All those posts about his breakdown after inheriting the house, the way he's become a recluse. It's building a perfect narrative." Tasha. Emily's best friend and fellow paralegal at the firm. I'd always found her a bit too eager to please, too interested in everyone else's business. Now I understood why. "Once we get control of the estate, we can finally be together properly," Emily said, her voice dropping to that intimate whisper again. "No more sneaking around, no more pretending I can stand living with him." I'd heard enough, more than enough. I backed away from the vent, my mind racing through the implications. They weren't just having an affair, they were systematically destroying my reputation to steal my inheritance. The inheritance that had made me, for the first time in my life, someone worth noticing in this small town where everyone knew everyone else's business. The next morning, I sat at the kitchen table with my coffee and my laptop, watching Emily get ready for work. She moved through her routine with the same efficiency she brought to everything else. Shower, makeup, coffee, quick kiss on my cheek that now felt like a brand. "You're up early," she said, not quite meeting my eyes. "Couldn't sleep. That faucet's been driving me crazy." "You should just call a plumber, Nate. We can afford it now." The way she said "we" made my skin crawl. "Old habits," I said, keeping my voice light. "Besides, I like fixing things myself. You never know what you might discover when you start taking things apart." She glanced at me sharply, but I was already looking back at my laptop screen, scrolling through the local news website. "Anything interesting happening in town?" "The usual. Mrs. Patterson's cat got stuck in another tree. The high school football team lost again. Oh, and apparently there's some gossip going around about the new millionaire in town having a mental breakdown." I looked up at her with what I hoped was innocent confusion. "Can you believe people have nothing better to do than make up stories?" Emily's face went pale, then flushed. "People talk, Nate. They always have, especially about anyone who comes into money suddenly." "True. But it's funny how specific some of these rumors are, almost like someone's been feeding information to the gossips." I clicked on another link, one that led to a Facebook post by someone named Haverford Truth, detailing my supposed erratic behavior at the grocery store last week. "Look at this. They even have dates and times. Very thorough for random gossip." "I wouldn't know anything about that," Emily said, but her voice was tight. "I need to get to work. Give my regards to Rich," I called after her as she headed for the door. "Tell him I said thanks for all his support during this difficult transition." The door slammed harder than necessary. I waited until her car disappeared down the tree-lined street before opening my laptop and getting to work. If Emily thought she'd married a naive, small-town loser, she was about to learn otherwise. 3 years of fixing computers and networks for half the businesses in town had taught me a few things about information gathering. And my grandfather, for all his faults, had been a shrewd businessman who'd left behind more than just money and property. I started with the obvious stuff, Emily's phone records, which I could access through our shared family plan. The number of calls to Rich's personal cell was staggering, especially in the last month. Late-night conversations, early morning check-ins, texts sent while she was sitting right next to me on the couch. Next, I pulled up the social media profiles that had been spreading rumors about my mental state. Haverford Truth was supposedly anonymous, but a little digging into the account's creation date and posting patterns revealed some interesting coincidences. Every post about my supposed breakdown had been made within hours of Emily working late at the office. The writing style matched some emails I'd seen her send to friends, and the account had been created just 2 days after the reading of my grandfather's will. But the real gold mine was in my grandfather's papers, which I'd barely touched since inheriting them along with everything else. Box after box of documents, letters, and business records that painted a picture of a man who'd spent decades learning everyone's secrets in this town, including Rich Keller's. I found the first reference buried in a folder marked Professional Associations, a letter from a private investigator dated 6 months ago, detailing Rich's gambling habits. Apparently, my grandfather had been keeping tabs on the legal community, and Rich's weekend trips to the casino in Connecticut had not gone unnoticed. Neither had his mounting debts to some very unsavory people. The second discovery was even more interesting, a series of photographs showing Rich entering and leaving a luxury condo on the other side of town. The same condo where, according to the property records, he'd been meeting with various clients for private consultations. Clients who happened to be attractive women going through messy divorces. By the time Emily came home that evening, I had assembled quite a collection of evidence. Not just about her affair, but about the systematic campaign to discredit me, and about Rich's own vulnerabilities. I was beginning to see the shape of something larger, a plan that would not only expose their betrayal, but turn their own weapons against them. "How was your day?" I asked as she walked into the kitchen, her face flushed and her hair slightly mussed in a way that suggested she'd spent her lunch hour somewhere other than the office cafeteria. "Busy. Lots of new cases coming in." She avoided my eyes, busying herself with opening a bottle of wine. "Rich says the firm's never been more successful." "I'm sure he does." I closed my laptop and stood up, stretching. "You know, I've been thinking about what you said this morning, about people talking. Maybe I should get out more, show everyone I'm perfectly fine. What do you think about throwing a party? Something to show off the house, let people see that the new money hasn't gone to my head?" Emily's hand froze on the wine bottle. "A party? Why not? We could invite everyone. Your colleagues from the firm, the neighbors, maybe some of the old crowd from high school. Really make it a community event." I smiled, and for the first time in months, it felt genuine. After all, what's the point of having all this space if we don't use it? "I don't think that's a good idea, Nate. People might get the wrong impression." "What kind of wrong impression? That I'm a normal person who wants to share his good fortune with his friends and neighbors?" I moved closer, studying her face. "Unless you think there's some reason I shouldn't be seen in public. Some reason people might think badly of me." "Of course not. I think we should keep a low profile for a while. Let things settle down." "Things? What things?" I kept my voice innocent, but I could see the panic building behind her eyes. "Emily, is there something you're not telling me? Something I should know about?" She turned away, pouring wine with hands that shook slightly. "I'm just tired, Nate. It's been a long day." "I'm sure it has." I watched her take a large gulp of wine, her composure cracking just enough to let me see the guilt underneath. "Well, I think I'll head out for a while. Maybe stop by Jules's gym, get some exercise. All this sitting around the house isn't good for me." "Jules still has that old boxing gym?" "He does. And he's always been a good listener, the kind of friend you can tell anything to." I grabbed my jacket from the back of the chair. "Don't wait up. I have a feeling this is going to be a long night." Jules Martinez had been running his boxing gym in the same converted warehouse for 15 years, and it looked like he'd decorated it sometime in the previous century. The heavy bags hung from chains that creaked with every punch. The ring in the center was held together with duct tape and hope, and the whole place smelled like sweat, leather, and the dreams of fighters who'd never quite made it. But it was honest in a way that most of Haverford wasn't, and Jules himself was the most straightforward person I'd ever known. Which is why I found myself standing in front of a heavy bag at 9 o'clock that night, pounding out my frustrations while he watched from behind the front desk. "You're hitting like a man with problems," Jules called out after I'd been going at it for 20 minutes straight. "Want to talk about it, or should I just let you beat that bag to pieces?" I stopped, breathing hard, my knuckles raw despite the wraps. "What would you do if you found out your wife was planning to steal everything you owned?" "Depends. Is this hypothetical, or are we talking about Emily?" That was Jules, straight to the point. I unwrapped my hands and walked over to where he was sitting, his massive frame making the folding chair look like a child's toy. At 40, he was still in fighting shape, with the kind of presence that made smart people think twice about starting trouble. "Let's say it's hypothetical." "Okay. Hypothetically, I'd make sure I had proof. Then I'd make sure everyone else knew about it, too. Nothing hurts worse than public shame, especially in a town like this." He leaned back in his chair, studying my face. "But if we're talking about Emily specifically, I'd say you better be real sure before you make any moves. That woman's got connections." "What kind of connections?" "The kind that matter in a small town. Her boss, for starters. Rich Keller's got half the city council in his pocket, plus most of the business owners who matter. You go after her, you're going after him too." "And if I had proof that he was dirty? That he was using his position to take advantage of clients?" Jules whistled low. "That would change things. But you'd need solid evidence, not just rumors. And you'd need to be smart about how you used it." He stood up, moving to the window that looked out on Main Street. "This town's got a long memory, Nate. Whatever you do, people will be talking about it for years. Maybe it's time they had something worth talking about." "That sounds like a man who's made up his mind." Jules turned back to face me. "What do you need?" That was the thing about real friends. They didn't waste time on judgment or advice you didn't ask for. They just offered to help. "Information, and maybe some backup when the time comes." "You got it. But be careful. Rich Keller didn't get where he is by playing fair, and if he's really planning something against you, he's probably got contingencies." I left the gym feeling clearer than I had in weeks. The physical exertion had burned off some of the anger, leaving behind something colder and more focused. Emily wanted to play games with my reputation and my inheritance. Fine. But she'd made one crucial mistake. She'd underestimated who she was playing against. The next morning, I put the first part of my plan into action. Instead of hiding in the mansion like the reclusive millionaire everyone expected me to be, I drove into town and made myself visible. I stopped at the hardware store, chatted with the owner about some repairs I was planning. I grabbed coffee at the diner and made small talk with the waitress about the upcoming town festival. I even stopped by the library and donated $1,000 for their new computer system. By lunchtime, half the town had seen me looking perfectly normal and rational. The other half had heard about it. I saved the best for last. A visit to Shay's Tavern, the unofficial headquarters of Haverford's gossip network. Shay O'Brien had been serving drinks and collecting secrets for 30 years, and his establishment was where reputations were made and destroyed over beer and whiskey. The lunch crowd was typical, a mix of retirees, shift workers, and people who'd rather drink their problems away than face them. I ordered a burger and a beer and settled in at the bar, making casual conversation with whoever would listen. "Heard you've been having some troubles," said Pete Morrison, a guy I'd gone to high school with who now worked at the post office. "People saying you've been acting strange since you inherited all that money." "Strange how?" I asked, keeping my voice mild. "You know, keeping to yourself, not socializing. Some folks think maybe the pressure got to you." "Interesting. I wonder who's been spreading that around." I took a sip of my beer, letting the question hang in the air. "I mean, I've been busy getting the house in order, learning about my grandfather's business interests, but I wouldn't call that strange. Would you?" Pete looked uncomfortable. "I guess not, but you know how people talk." "I do know, and I'm starting to wonder if maybe someone's been encouraging them to talk, someone who might benefit from making me look unstable." The conversation around us had gotten quieter. In a place like Shay's, everyone listened to everyone else's business, and the idea that someone might be deliberately spreading rumors was the kind of scandal that could keep the town talking for months. "That's a serious accusation," said a voice behind me. I turned to see Rich Keller himself, looking less polished than usual in khakis and a polo shirt that couldn't quite hide the stress lines around his eyes. "Rich, funny running into you here." I stood up and extended my hand, which he shook reluctantly. "I was just telling Pete how grateful I am for all the support you've been giving Emily during this transition. It must be nice having such a hands-on boss." His jaw tightened slightly. "Emily's a valuable member of our team. We look out for our people." "I'm sure you do. In fact, I was thinking I should probably thank you properly. Maybe take you and Emily out to dinner somewhere nice, the three of us." I smiled, watching his face. "Unless you think that might be awkward for some reason?" "Not at all, though I'm pretty busy these days. A lot of new cases coming in." "I bet. Emily mentioned you've been working a lot of late nights recently. Very dedicated." I finished my beer and put some money on the bar. "Well, I should let you get back to it. Oh, and Rich, if you ever need any IT work done, let me know. I've gotten pretty good at recovering data from damaged systems. You'd be amazed what you can find if you know where to look." I left him standing at the bar, his face pale and his hands clenched into fists. The real test came that evening. I'd spent the afternoon setting up surveillance equipment around the house. Nothing illegal, just security cameras focused on the driveway and front entrance. If Emily and Rich were planning to document my erratic behavior, I wanted to make sure I had my own record of events. Emily came home later than usual, and she wasn't alone. Through the kitchen window, I watched her get out of Rich's BMW, smoothing down her skirt and checking her lipstick in the side mirror. They stood by the car for several minutes, talking in low voices, before Rich drove away and Emily came inside. "Sorry I'm late," she said, not quite meeting my eyes. "Rich needed help with a brief that's due tomorrow." "No problem. I kept dinner warm." I handed her a plate and watched her try to act normal while her hair was still mussed and her blouse was buttoned wrong. "How was your day? You look a little flustered." "Just tired. It's been hectic at the office." "I'm sure. I actually stopped by to see Rich this afternoon, at Shay's. Thought I'd thank him for being so supportive." Emily's fork clattered against her plate. "You went to Shay's? Why not? I figured it was time I stopped hiding in this house like some kind of hermit." People were starting to talk. I sat down across from her, studying her face. "Funny thing, though. Rich seemed really nervous when I mentioned how much time you two have been spending together. Almost like he was worried I might get the wrong idea." "That's ridiculous. Rich is my boss. Of course we spend time together." "Of course. Though I have to admit I was a little surprised when Mrs. Patterson mentioned seeing you at that new condo complex on Elm Street last week. I didn't know we had clients over there." The color drained from Emily's face. "Mrs. Patterson must be confused. I've never been to any condo complex." "Probably. You know how these older folks get mixed up." I took a bite of my dinner, chewing slowly. Still, it got me thinking about how much I don't know about your work. Maybe I should take more of an interest. Show up at some of those late-night strategy sessions. "Nate, that's not appropriate?" "You're probably right. I wouldn't want to make things awkward between you and your colleagues." I stood up, my dinner barely touched. "I think I'll go work on some of Grandfather's papers. Amazing what you can learn about people when you really dig into the details." I left her sitting at the kitchen table, staring at her plate with the look of someone who'd just realized the trap was closing around her. My grandfather's study was a monument to paranoia and meticulous record-keeping. File cabinets lined every wall, each drawer labeled with cryptic codes that had taken me weeks to decipher. Harold Cross had spent 40 years building a construction empire in New England, and he'd apparently never thrown away a single document, photograph, or piece of correspondence. What I'd initially dismissed as the hoarding of a bitter old man was revealing itself to be something far more valuable. A comprehensive intelligence network that covered every important person in Haverford and most of the surrounding towns. The file on Rich Keller was 3 inches thick. I spread the contents across the massive oak desk, organizing them chronologically. The earliest documents dated back 15 years, to when Rich had first joined Morrison and Associates as a junior partner. Even then, my grandfather had been keeping tabs on him, noting his expensive tastes, his social climbing, and his tendency to cut corners when he thought nobody was watching. The gambling problem had started small. Weekend trips to Foxwoods, occasional poker games with clients. But over the years, the stakes had gotten higher, and Rich's luck had gotten worse. The private investigator's reports painted a picture of a man living well beyond his means, using his law practice to fund an addiction that was spiraling out of control. More interesting were the client files. Rich had been systematically overcharging divorce clients, padding his hours, and in at least 3 cases, accepting payments for services he'd never provided. He'd also been having affairs with at least 2 female clients, using their emotional vulnerability to manipulate them into larger retainer fees. But the real bombshell was in the most recent folder. Rich owed money to people who didn't accept late payments or payment plans, the kind of people who collected debts with interest rates that would make a loan shark blush. According to the investigator's notes, Rich was into them for nearly $200,000, and they were getting impatient. I photographed every document, uploaded them to a secure cloud storage account, and made multiple backup copies. Then I started planning phase 2 of my response to Emily and Rich's little conspiracy. The next morning, I drove to the offices of Morrison, Keller, and Associates. The law firm occupied a converted Victorian mansion on the good side of town, all polished brass and expensive landscaping designed to project success and respectability. I'd been there exactly once before, for the firm's holiday party last year, where I'd spent the evening listening to Rich hold court about his latest courtroom victories while Emily hung on his every word. The receptionist, a young woman who looked fresh out of college, brightened when I walked in. "Mr. Cross, how nice to see you. Are you here to see Emily?" "Actually, I was hoping to speak with Rich. Is he available?" "Let me check." She picked up the phone, spoke quietly for a moment, then hung up with a puzzled expression. "He says he's too busy to see you right now. Maybe you could make an appointment for next week?" "That's okay. I'll wait." I settled into one of the leather chairs in the reception area and pulled out my phone. "Take your time. I've got nowhere else to be." 20 minutes later, Rich emerged from his office, his face tight with irritation. "Nate, this is unexpected." "I was in the neighborhood. Thought we could have that chat I mentioned yesterday." "I'm really swamped today. Maybe we could—" "It won't take long." I stood up, moving close enough that he had to look up at me. Rich was shorter than I'd remembered, and the expensive suit couldn't hide the fact that he was soft around the middle. "Just a few questions about some business matters." He glanced around the reception area, clearly aware that we had an audience. "Fine. 5 minutes?" His office was exactly what I'd expected. Leather-bound law books, diplomas on the walls, a view of the town square through tall windows. Rich closed the door and moved behind his desk, using the furniture as a barrier between us. "What's this about, Nate?" "I've been going through my grandfather's papers. Fascinating reading. Did you know he kept files on most of the prominent people in town?" Rich's face went pale. I wouldn't know anything about that." "Of course not. But I found some interesting information about various legal matters, business dealings, personal situations, the kind of information that might be valuable to the right person." I sat down in the chair across from his desk, making myself comfortable. "For instance, did you know that some people consider gambling debts to be legally collectible in certain circumstances?" "I don't know what you're talking about." "No? Well, maybe this will refresh your memory." I pulled out my phone and showed him one of the photographs I'd taken. A receipt from Foxwoods Casino dated last week, showing a loss of $15,000 in a single night. "Expensive hobby you've got there." Rich's hands were shaking as he reached for the phone. "Where did you get this?" "That's not really the important question. The important question is what I plan to do with it." I put the phone back in my pocket and leaned forward. "See, I've been hearing some disturbing rumors about my mental state. People seem to think I'm not capable of managing my own affairs, and the strangest thing is, these rumors all seem to trace back to people connected to your firm." "That's ridiculous. We would never—" "Never what? Never conspire to have a client declared mentally incompetent so you could gain control of his assets? Never use your position to manipulate vulnerable people? Never lie to cover up your own criminal behavior?" Rich stood up abruptly, his chair rolling backward into the window. "I think you should leave." "I think you're right." I stood as well, straightening my jacket. "But before I go, let me make something clear. I know about the gambling. I know about the affairs with your clients. I know about the money you owe to some very unpleasant people. And I know about your little plan with my wife." "You don't know anything, don't I? Then you won't mind if I share some of this information with the State Bar Association, or with your other clients, or with your wife?" I moved toward the door, then paused. "Oh, and Rich? The next time you and Emily decide to have one of your strategy sessions, you might want to choose a location that doesn't have security cameras." I left him standing in his office, staring after me with the expression of a man who'd just realized his world was about to collapse. The confrontation with Rich was satisfying, but it was only the opening move. If Emily and her conspirators wanted to play dirty, I was prepared to show them just how dirty things could get. But first, I needed to understand the full scope of their plan. That afternoon, I paid a visit to someone who might have answers. Tasha Williams, Emily's best friend, and the woman who'd apparently been orchestrating the social media campaign against me. Tasha lived in a small apartment complex on the outskirts of town, the kind of place where young professionals lived while they saved money for something better. I'd been there once before, for a birthday party Emily had insisted we attend, and I remembered thinking that Tasha had expensive tastes for someone on a paralegal's salary. She answered the door in yoga pants and an oversized sweater, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. The casual look didn't hide the calculation in her eyes as she took in my presence on her doorstep. "Nate, what a surprise." "Hi, Tasha. I hope you don't mind me dropping by unannounced. I was hoping we could talk." "About what?" About friendship, loyalty, the kind of things that matter when people are going through difficult times. I smiled, keeping my voice friendly. Can I come in? She hesitated, then stepped aside. The apartment was exactly as I'd remembered it. Modern furniture that was just a little too expensive, artwork that looked like it came from galleries rather than department stores, and electronics that suggested someone with more money than her job should provide. Nice place, I said, looking around. You've done well for yourself. I work hard. I'm sure you do. Emily's always talking about how dedicated you are, how much you help out around the office. I sat down on her couch without being invited. She says you're like a sister to her. Emily's a good friend. The best kind of friend. The kind who stands by you no matter what. Even when you're going through tough times, having problems with your marriage, maybe not thinking clearly. I leaned back, making myself comfortable. I bet she really values your support right now. Tasha remained standing, her arms crossed. Is there a point to this, Nate? Just making conversation. Though I have to admit, I'm curious about something. Emily mentioned that you've been helping her with some research lately. Social media, public relations, that sort of thing. I don't know what you mean. No? Well, maybe you could help me understand something. I pulled out my phone and opened the Facebook app. There's this account called Haverford Truth that's been posting some very detailed information about my personal life. The writing style reminds me of someone, but I can't quite put my finger on who. Tasha's face went rigid. I wouldn't know anything about that. Of course not. Though it's funny. The account was created using an IP address that traces back to this apartment complex. What are the odds of that? She moved toward the door. I think you should leave. In a minute. First, I want to make sure we understand each other. I stood up, and she took an involuntary step backward. I know what you've been doing, Tasha. I know about the fake social media accounts, the rumors you've been spreading, the lies you've been telling to make me look unstable. The question is why? You're paranoid. Maybe. Or maybe I'm just paying attention for the first time in years. I moved closer, and she backed up against the wall. See? I've been doing some research of my own, and I discovered some interesting things about your finances, like how you've been making deposits that don't match your salary, regular payments from an account registered to a shell company that traces back to Rich Keller. Her face went white. That's impossible. Is it? Because it looks to me like Rich has been paying you to destroy my reputation. The question is, what did he promise you in return? A cut of my inheritance, a job at a better firm, or maybe something more personal? You don't understand. Then help me understand. Explain to me why my wife's best friend has been working to destroy my life. Explain to me why someone I trusted has been lying about me to anyone who will listen. Tasha's composure finally cracked. You want to know why? Because you don't deserve any of this. You never worked for it, never earned it. You just got lucky because your grandfather finally decided to acknowledge your existence. And that bothers you? It bothers everyone. You think people don't talk about how you went from being a nobody to being the richest man in town overnight? You think they don't resent it? Maybe. But that doesn't explain why you're working with Rich to steal it from me. She laughed bitterly. Rich doesn't want your money, Nate. He wants Emily. And Emily wants a life that doesn't include being married to a small-town loser who got lucky. So you decided to help them. I decided to help my friend get what she deserves. Someone who appreciates her, someone who can give her the kind of life she's always wanted. And if destroying me was the price, you were willing to pay it. You were never right for her anyway. Emily's smart, ambitious, beautiful. She could have had anyone. Instead, she settled for you because she thought you were safe. The words stung because they carried the ring of truth. Emily had married me during a period when she was recovering from a bad breakup, looking for stability rather than passion. I'd known it even then, but I'd convinced myself that love would grow over time. Well, I said finally, I guess we all learned something today. Emily learned that safe doesn't mean stupid. Rich learned that some people fight back when you try to destroy them, and you learned that betraying someone's trust has consequences. What's that supposed to mean? It means that everything you've done to me, I'm going to do to you. The lies, the rumors, the systematic destruction of reputation, all of it, except I won't need to make anything up. I headed for the door, then turned back. Oh, and Tasha, you might want to ask Rich about those gambling debts before you get too invested in his promises. The people he owes money to don't usually wait for legal proceedings to collect what they're owed. I left her standing in her apartment, finally understanding that she'd chosen the wrong side in a war she didn't fully comprehend. The Haverford Country Club's annual charity gala was the social event of the season, where the town's elite gathered to see and be seen while writing tax-deductible checks for causes they'd forget about by morning. I'd never attended before, partly because I couldn't afford the ticket price, and partly because I'd never been invited. This year was different. This year, I was not only invited but listed as a major sponsor. The invitation, printed on heavy cardstock and delivered by hand, identified me as one of the evening's honored guests. It was exactly the kind of public recognition that Emily had always craved, and exactly the kind of spotlight that would serve my purposes perfectly. I arrived alone, having told Emily that morning that I thought she should attend with her colleagues from the firm while I made my own entrance. She'd seemed relieved, probably assuming it would give her more freedom to spend the evening with Rich without having to maintain the pretense of a happy marriage. The country club's ballroom was decorated in gold and white, with round tables arranged around a small stage where various community leaders would give speeches about the importance of giving back. I recognized most of the faces: business owners, politicians, the old money families who'd been running Haverford since before my grandfather made his fortune. What they didn't recognize was the man I'd become. Nathan Cross," said a voice behind me. I turned to see Judge Patricia Henley, a stern woman in her 60s who'd been presiding over the county courthouse for as long as anyone could remember. "I was hoping I'd have a chance to speak with you tonight. Your Honor, it's a pleasure to see you." I knew your grandfather well. Harold was a complicated man, but he was fair in his business dealings. I hope you'll continue that tradition. I intend to honor his legacy in every way possible. I paused, choosing my words carefully. In fact, I've been reviewing some of his papers, and I found some interesting correspondence, including a few letters you exchanged regarding certain legal matters. Judge Henley's expression didn't change, but I caught a flicker of something in her eyes. Harold often sought legal advice on complex issues. He believed in following proper procedures. Even when those procedures involved uncomfortable revelations about people in positions of trust? Especially then. She studied my face for a moment. "I assume you've been having some difficulties lately. Adjustments to sudden wealth can be challenging." "Less challenging than I expected, though I have been concerned about some rumors regarding my mental state, rumors that seem designed to undermine my credibility. Rumors have a way of disappearing when they are proven false, particularly when the people spreading them have their own credibility questioned. It wasn't exactly a promise of support, but it was close enough." Judge Henley moved away to greet other guests, leaving me with the distinct impression that my grandfather's influence extended beyond the grave. I made my way through the crowd, accepting congratulations on my inheritance and making small talk with people who'd barely acknowledged my existence 6 months ago. The transformation was remarkable. Suddenly I was charming, intelligent, someone worth knowing. Money, I was learning, didn't just change your circumstances. It changed how people saw you, and more importantly, how you saw yourself. I spotted Emily across the room, stunning in a black dress that I'd never seen before and probably couldn't have afforded on my old salary. She was standing with a group that included Rich and several other lawyers from the firm, laughing at something someone had said. She looked happy in a way I hadn't seen in years. Rich, on the other hand, looked terrible. His face was drawn, his eyes darted nervously around the room, and he kept checking his phone as if expecting bad news. The confident attorney who'd built his reputation on aggressive courtroom tactics had been replaced by a man who jumped at shadows. I decided it was time to make my move. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, approaching their group with a smile that felt predatory, "I hope you're all having a wonderful evening." The conversation stopped abruptly. Emily's face went pale, while Rich looked like he was about to be sick. "Nate," Emily said, forcing a smile, "I didn't see you come in." "I've been making the rounds, thanking people for their support during this transition period. It's amazing how many friends you discover when your circumstances change." I looked directly at Rich. Though I have to say, some people have been more supportive than others. "We're all happy for your success," said one of the other lawyers, a woman I vaguely recognized from Emily's office parties. "That's very kind. Though I have to admit, I've been hearing some concerning rumors lately. Stories about my mental health, suggestions that I'm not capable of managing my affairs." I paused, letting the words sink in. I'm sure none of you would know anything about that. The group exchanged uncomfortable glances. Rich's phone buzzed, and he glanced at it, his face going even paler. "Rumors are just that," Emily said quickly. "People talk, especially about anyone who comes into money suddenly." "True, but these rumors have been remarkably specific, almost as if someone with inside knowledge has been providing details to make them more believable." I pulled out my own phone and opened the Facebook app. For instance, this post from last week claims I had a breakdown at the grocery store, complete with timestamps and witness accounts. Very thorough journalism for an anonymous gossip page. Rich's phone buzzed again. This time, when he looked at it, he actually swayed on his feet. "Rich," I said, my voice full of false concern. "You look unwell. Is everything all right?" "I'm fine," he said, but his voice was strained. "Are you sure? Because you look like someone who's just received very bad news." I moved closer, lowering my voice so only he could hear. The kind of news that might come from people who don't like to be kept waiting. Rich's phone buzzed a third time. When he looked at it, he actually gasped. "I have to go," he said abruptly. "Emergency at the office." "At this hour? On a Saturday night?" I shook my head sympathetically. "The legal profession is so demanding. I hope it's nothing too serious." Rich was already walking away, pushing through the crowd toward the exit. I watched him go, then turned back to the group, which was now staring at me with a mixture of confusion and concern. "Poor Rich," I said with a touch of sympathy, trying to sound casual as I observed the stressed-out businessman across the room. "He's been under a lot of stress lately, financial pressures, I think. You know how it is when you're living beyond your means." I gave Emily a knowing look, but it was hard to miss the tension in her face, the kind of tension that usually preceded a confrontation. She grabbed my arm, her fingers digging in a little too tightly. "Nate, can I speak with you privately?" "Of course," I replied, though a small smirk tugged at the corner of my mouth. "Though, I should mention, I'm planning to give a little speech tonight. Thank the community for their support, talk about my plans for the future. I think people will find it very illuminating." I let the last part hang in the air, knowing full well it would stir her up even more. I let her pull me away from the crowd, leading me to a quiet corner of the ballroom. We were still visible to anyone who cared to look, but the sounds of music and chatter grew faint as we moved further into the shadows. The space was intimate, just big enough for us to have a conversation, but not so isolated that it felt like we were completely out of view. "What are you doing?" she hissed under her breath, her eyes darting around as though she were afraid someone would overhear. I kept my voice calm and composed, even though a fire had been steadily building inside me for days now. "I'm attending a charity gala, socializing with my neighbors, participating in community life." I gave her a playful grin, watching as her eyes narrowed. "Isn't this what you always wanted? For me to be more social, more engaged?" Her nostrils flared, and she leaned in closer, her voice dangerously low. "You're embarrassing yourself. And me." I couldn't help the laugh that escaped my lips, but it wasn't the kind of laugh anyone would consider lighthearted. "Am I? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like I'm finally fitting in. People are actually interested in what I have to say now." My words hung in the air like a challenge. It's funny, you know, how things change when you stop being invisible. Her eyes flickered with something, guilt, annoyance, I wasn't sure. But she snapped back, her voice dripping with cold disdain. "Because of the money. That's the only reason any of these people care about you." "You're probably right," I said, my tone becoming flat. "But that's curious. Coming from you? After all, the money's the only reason you're still with me, isn't it?" I watched her face turn red, the color fading from her cheeks as the words hit. The small satisfaction of seeing her uncomfortable was a fleeting comfort, but I knew it wouldn't be enough to fix what had already been broken. Her response came quickly, though it lacked conviction. "That's not true." "Isn't it?" I asked, stepping closer, my voice soft but dangerous. "Because I have to tell you, Emily, I've learned some fascinating things about my wife lately, about her loyalty, her honesty, her commitment to our marriage vows." I leaned in even further, lowering my voice to a whisper so only she could hear. "I know about Rich. I know about the plan to have me declared incompetent. I know about the social media campaign. I know everything." She took a step back, her eyes widening in shock, her mouth opening and closing as if she were searching for the right words to deny it, to explain it away. But there was no denying it now. "You're being paranoid," she finally said, but even she didn't believe her own words. "Maybe," I said, my tone colder than it had ever been before. "Or maybe I'm just not as stupid as you thought I was." I straightened my jacket, making sure everything was in place, feeling a strange sense of calm wash over me. "Well, I should probably get ready for my speech. I have so many people to thank, so many stories to tell." I gave her one last look, a mixture of pity and anger in my gaze before turning on my heel. But before I could take more than a few steps, she reached out, her voice pleading. "Nate, please, we can work this out. We can talk about this at home, figure out..." "Figure out what?" I interrupted, my voice rising in frustration, all the anger I'd been holding and pouring out. "How to make this go away? How to convince me to pretend I don't know what you've been doing?" I shook my head, my lips curling into a bitter smile. "I'm afraid that ship has sailed, Emily. You made your choice when you decided to betray me. Now you get to live with the consequences." Without waiting for a response, I turned my back on her, walking away with purpose, the weight of what I had just revealed lingering in the air between us. I could feel her eyes on my back, but I didn't care. I had already made the decision to stop playing the fool. The quiet, predictable husband she'd married was gone forever, and the person standing here now wasn't afraid to face the truth, no matter how messy it was. As I moved toward the stage to prepare for my speech, I couldn't help but think about how much had changed. Tonight wasn't just about thanking the community, it was about taking control of my own narrative. Finally, after all these years, I was the one with the power. The speech went better than I'd hoped. I thanked the community for welcoming me, talked about my plans to honor my grandfather's legacy, and made several pointed comments about the importance of loyalty and trust in small communities. I also announced my intention to establish a foundation for investigating financial crimes against vulnerable individuals, with a particular focus on legal professionals who abuse their positions of trust. The applause was enthusiastic, though I noticed several people glancing toward the table where Emily sat alone, looking like she wanted to disappear into the floor. As the evening wound down, I made my way back through the crowd, accepting congratulations and making plans for future meetings. I was almost to the exit when Tasha appeared beside me, her face tight with anger. "You think you're so clever," she said quietly, "but you have no idea what you're dealing with." "Don't I? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like I'm dealing with people who thought they could destroy me and steal everything I owned, people who underestimated their opponent. Rich isn't going to just disappear, Nate. He has resources, connections, he can fight back." "Can he?" Because those text messages he was getting tonight suggest otherwise. Apparently his creditors are getting impatient, something about missed payments and broken promises. Tasha's face went white. "What did you do?" "Me? Nothing. I simply made sure that certain information reached the right people, the kind of people who don't like being lied to about repayment schedules." "You're going to destroy him." "No, Tasha. Rich destroyed himself. I'm just making sure everyone knows about it." I paused at the door, looking back at the ballroom where Emily still sat alone at her table. "The same way you and Emily tried to destroy me. The only difference is, when I do it, I don't have to lie." The call came at 6 a.m, 3 days after the charity gala. I was already awake, sitting in my grandfather's study with coffee and the morning paper when the phone rang with an unknown number. "Mr. Cross, this is Detective Sarah Walsh with the Haverford Police Department. I need to speak with you about Richard Keller." My pulse quickened, but I kept my voice steady. "What about him?" "He's missing. His wife reported that he never came home Saturday night after the charity gala. His car was found abandoned at a rest stop on Route 95, but there's no sign of him." "That's terrible. Is there anything I can do to help?" "We're talking to everyone who saw him that night. Several witnesses mentioned that you had a conversation with him and that he seemed upset afterward. He did seem distressed about something. He said he had an emergency at the office and left abruptly." I paused as if thinking. "Detective, I hope you don't mind me asking, but have you looked into his financial situation? I've heard rumors that he might have been having some difficulties." "What kind of difficulties?" "Gambling debts. The kind that sometimes attract unwanted attention from people who aren't patient about repayment." There was a long silence. "We'll look into that. In the meantime, if you think of anything else that might be relevant, please give me a call." After I hung up, I sat back in my grandfather's chair and allowed myself a moment of satisfaction. Rich's disappearance wasn't entirely unexpected. Men with his kind of debts sometimes found it prudent to relocate quickly when their creditors lost patience. The fact that he'd chosen to run rather than face the consequences of his actions was simply confirmation of his character. Emily, of course, was devastated. She spent the next week alternating between frantic phone calls to anyone who might have information about Rich's whereabouts and long periods of crying in her room. I played the supportive husband, bringing her tissues and coffee while privately marveling at how completely she'd fallen apart. "The police think something terrible might have happened to him," she said one evening, her eyes red from crying. "I'm sure they're doing everything they can to find him," I replied, sitting on the edge of the bed. "Though I have to admit, I'm a little surprised by how much this is affecting you. I mean, he was your boss, but you seem to be taking this very personally." She looked at me sharply. "He was a friend, Nate. A good friend. Of course, and I'm sure he'll turn up soon. Men like Rich always land on their feet." I stood up, smoothing down my shirt. "In the meantime, I've been thinking about our future, about what we want to do with our lives now that our circumstances have changed." "What do you mean?" "Well, with Rich gone, you'll probably need to find a new job. And I've been considering some changes myself. Maybe it's time we made a fresh start somewhere else." "Leave Haverford?" "Why not? There's nothing keeping us here anymore. We could travel, see the world, find someplace where nobody knows our history." I moved toward the door. Think about it. We could be anyone we wanted to be. But even as I said the words, I knew Emily would never agree to leave, not while there was still a chance that Rich might return, might still offer her the life she'd dreamed of, which was exactly what I was counting on. The next phase of my plan required patience and careful timing. Over the following weeks, I began making subtle changes to our life together. I started working out regularly, improving my appearance and confidence. I began socializing more, accepting invitations to dinner parties and business meetings where I impressed people with my intelligence and wit. Most importantly, I started making it clear that I was no longer the pushover husband Emily had married. "You're different," she said one evening after I'd returned from a meeting with some local business leaders who were interested in partnering with my grandfather's construction company. "Different how?" "More assertive, confident. It's like you're a completely different person." Maybe I am. Maybe inheriting this money didn't just change my bank account. Maybe it changed me. I poured myself a glass of wine, not offering her one. "The question is, do you like the person I'm becoming?" She didn't answer, which was answer enough. The final piece of the puzzle came from an unexpected source. 2 weeks after Rich's disappearance, Tasha showed up at my door, looking haggard and desperate. "I need to talk to you," she said without preamble. "Of course. Come in." I led her to the living room, noting the way she looked around at the expensive furnishings and artwork, as if seeing them for the first time. "Can I get you something to drink?" "I know what you did." "I've done a lot of things lately. You'll have to be more specific." "Rich, his disappearance. You're behind it somehow." I sat down across from her, crossing my legs casually. "That's a serious accusation, Tasha. I hope you have some evidence to back it up." "I know you found out about his gambling debts. I know you contacted his creditors, told them where to find him. Did I? That would be quite vindictive of me. Though I suppose if someone had been trying to destroy my life and steal my inheritance, I might be motivated to share relevant information with interested parties." "He could be in serious danger." "He could be. Or he could be sitting on a beach somewhere, having decided that discretion was the better part of valor." I leaned forward slightly. "But either way, that's not really my problem, is it?" Tasha's composure cracked. "What do you want, Nate? What's your endgame here?" "I want what everyone wants: justice, accountability, for people to face the consequences of their actions. And Emily? What happens to her?" "That's up to Emily. She can choose to stay married to me and try to rebuild our relationship based on honesty and respect, or she can choose to keep living in the past, waiting for a man who's never coming back." "She loves him? Does she? Or does she love what he represented? The status, the excitement, the escape from a life she found boring?" I stood up, moving to the window that looked out on the street where Emily and I had walked together as newlyweds. "The funny thing about love, Tasha, is that it's supposed to be based on truth. When you build a relationship on lies and betrayal, you're not really in love. You're in love with an illusion. So you're going to keep her trapped here, married to you, even though she doesn't want to be?" "I'm not keeping her trapped. She's free to leave anytime she wants. File for divorce, walk away, start over somewhere else." I turned back to face her. "But if she stays, it's going to be on my terms. No more lies, no more schemes, no more treating me like I'm too stupid to notice what's happening in my own marriage." "And if she chooses to leave?" "Then she leaves with nothing. The prenup she signed is very clear about what happens in case of adultery. She'll get exactly what she brought to this marriage, which, if I remember correctly, was a pile of student loan debt and a used Honda." Tasha stared at me for a long moment. "You've really thought this through, haven't you?" "I've had plenty of time to think. 3 months of listening to my wife plan my destruction tends to focus the mind." She left without another word, and I knew she'd go straight to Emily with everything I'd told her, which was exactly what I wanted. It was time for Emily to understand her situation completely, to realize that all her options had consequences, and that the man she'd tried to manipulate and control was no longer willing to play that game. The confrontation came that night. Emily stormed into the study where I was reading, her face flushed with anger. "Tasha told me what you said. About the prenup. About Rich. About everything." "Good. I was wondering when we'd finally have an honest conversation." "You bastard. You planned all of this, didn't you? Rich's disappearance, the rumors, everything." "I responded to your plan, Emily. You and Rich and Tasha decided to destroy me and steal my inheritance. All I did was defend myself. By destroying the man I love? By exposing the truth about the man you thought you loved. Rich was a criminal, Emily. He was stealing from his clients, cheating on his wife, and in debt to dangerous people. Did you really think that was going to end well?" He was going to leave his wife for me. We were going to be together. Were you? Or was he just telling you what you wanted to hear while he figured out how to get his hands on my money? I closed my book and looked at her directly. Think about it, Emily. If Rich really loved you, why did he run when things got difficult? Why didn't he try to contact you before he disappeared? She didn't have an answer for that. Here's what's going to happen, I continued. You're going to decide what kind of life you want. If you want to stay married to me, we're going to start over, completely. New rules, new expectations, new level of honesty. If you want to leave, you can file for divorce tomorrow, but either way, the games are over. And if I stay, then you stay because you choose to, not because you're trapped, and you stay knowing exactly who I am now, not who you thought I was. Emily stood in the doorway for a long moment, her face cycling through anger, fear, and something that might have been respect. I need time to think, she said finally. Take all the time you need, but Emily? I waited until she looked at me. Don't mistake patience for weakness. I've learned that lesson already. 3 days later, I found a note on the kitchen table when I came down for breakfast. Emily had packed her things and moved back in with her mother. The note was brief. She needed space to figure out what she wanted, and she'd be in touch through her lawyer about the divorce proceedings. I read it twice, then folded it carefully and put it in my grandfather's desk drawer next to all the other documents that told the story of how Nathan Cross had learned to fight back. Outside, Haverford was waking up to another ordinary day, but for me, everything had changed. I was no longer the quiet, overlooked man who'd inherited a fortune by accident. I was someone who'd been tested and had chosen to fight rather than surrender. The phone rang as I was finishing my coffee. Detective Walsh again, with an update on Rich's case. We found him, she said. He's alive, but he's not coming back to Haverford anytime soon. Turns out he's been cooperating with federal investigators about some financial irregularities at his firm. He's in witness protection now. I see. Well, I'm glad he's safe. Mr. Cross, I have to ask, did you have any contact with the people he owed money to? Detective, I'm just a small-town guy who inherited some money from his grandfather. I wouldn't even know how to contact people like that. She didn't sound entirely convinced, but there was nothing she could prove. After she hung up, I sat back in my chair and allowed myself a smile. Rich was alive, which meant I hadn't crossed any lines I couldn't live with, but he was also gone forever, which meant Emily would finally have to stop waiting for him to rescue her from the life she'd chosen. As for me, I had a new life to build. A life where I was no longer the underdog, no longer the man people underestimated. I'd learned what I was capable of when pushed to the edge, and I'd learned that sometimes the only way to win was to be willing to become the villain in someone else's story. The inheritance had given me money and property, but the real gift my grandfather had left me was the knowledge that in this world, you either fight for what's yours or watch someone else take it away. I'd chosen to fight, and I'd won.